So, good morning, everybody. It is truly a blessing to be part of this community, and I know that I say so all the time, but it's so very true. I look forward to this minute where I get to just press the button on my screens and say hello to all of you and to feel a community that has become more and more real with every day. It might be broadcast 1053, but it feels like coming home. That number really doesn't describe the emotionality, and given that today is also day 223 since October 7th, this is a community that matters more and more with time. So bless you all for being present in this way. It's good to see all of you here, not just on a screen, but here. So thank you for all of that. Let's learn some Torah. It's Parshat Emor, and we've talked about different aspects of the Torah portion, including the rules for priests, the way we tell time, and the way that that actually intersects, of course, from the ancient world with our modern experience. Because if the way that we sanctify time is talked about already in the Torah, then the idea of time is recognized in the Torah, and what we do with it matters. If you remember, the Parsha says, Elim Moadei Adonai Mikra E Kodesh Asher Tikru Otam, which means these are the sanctified days to God which you declare. And that is an affirmation of the agency that we have, the role that we have as living people to sanctify time, which the verse seems to say matters to God. What we do matters to God, and that is a radical claim of the Torah. So much of the ancient world outside of the Israelite/Jewish community made human beings so small compared to the gods. What the gods wanted was to be appeased. And what people did was all about meeting the gods' whims, as opposed to what the Torah believes, which is God's greatest concern is that we do justice, is that we are kind. I know that might not sound so radical to you, but that tells you how deeply the Torah's wisdom and holiness have been internalized by society, what we might take for granted in terms of loving your neighbor as yourself as an imperative, not as a reality yet, far from it. But that very impulse, well, that started somewhere, and we should be proud that this parsha contains so much instruction, so much potential for how we might actually build a world that is kinder, a world that is more just, a world where the reverberations of October 7th would never have happened in the first place. So what I want to do is read one verse from this parsha, one verse, because it actually has so much in it. Now, again, I never know what the theology of any group might be. I'm sure that in our beautiful community, there are people who do believe in God and who don't believe in God, and who believe in God but mean it like this, or who believe in God and mean it like that. And I don't only mean between the people who are Jewish and the people who are not Jewish in our community, all of whom are sisters and brothers, all of whom are welcome, all of whom deserve the dignity of being seen and being loved. But I even mean within the Jewish community. Those discrepancies are part of the rich tapestry of Jewish community. We include, in a radical way, people who believe radically differently. It's not actually a litmus test. You don't have to believe a certain way to belong. So thank God. Thank God, friends. Thank God for all of this. So I want to share this one verse. It's from this week's parsha, from Parshat Emor, and it is about the notion of holy time. I've got two bookmarks in this lovely chumash. If you're ever looking for a new chumash, it's very pretty. It's got this artistic depiction of Jerusalem. This is the Koren Talpiot Shabbat Chumash. For a Hebrew speaker, it works. If you need English, it might not, but it's pretty, and I'm glad to share it. So, in this week's parsha, we have this verse. It's chapter 22, verse 32 in the book of Leviticus, if you'd like to look it up. Vayikra chaf bet lamed bet. V'lo techalalu et shem kodshi, v'nikdashti betoch b'nei Yisrael, ani Adonai mekadishchem. So my just free translation is, and do not profane the name, my holy name, and you will sanctify me, betoch b'nei Israel, within the people Israel. And I want to point out that there are two valences here. There's an active and a passive if you hear the Hebrew grammar. So I'll do my best to translate it in that way. Do not actively profane my holy name, and I will be sanctified. I will be sanctified, meaning there's an active and a passive tone just by the grammar here, because it's two facets of the same thing. If you do not profane, which is the opposite of to make holy, it's the sacred and the profane. You can read many, many philosophical works on this, including a famous one by the great sociologist Emile Durkheim. The sacred and the profane are often seen as opposites, and certainly in the biblical text, they mean the opposite thing, but it's the same idea. If you do not profane, if I do not profane God's holy name, I am sanctifying God. But vinikdashti is something that happens, it seems, in a passive way. It happens to God. So there have been great commentators on this, including Rav Yosef Kamenetsky, who was quoted by the chief rabbi of Great Britain recently on a comment on this week's Parsha, Rabbi Ephraim Mervis, a beautiful teaching, which is that there are ways that sanctify God that are passive, and there are ways that sanctify God that are active. And they have this beautiful together, and maybe we together have this beautiful way of manifesting the two facets. There are strategic ways that we act that should be sanctifying, that raise up this world, that acknowledge what is holy and amplify it. You can think of countless examples, I'm sure. I'm proud to see so many of us in so many ways amplify, not just on social media, but in reality, holiness, what it is to sanctify the experience. One recent one is that in Westchester, thanks to our Mishlachat, a group of Israeli emissaries who really have held our community so tightly and so beautifully these ravaging months, they helped create a memorial to October 7th in Westchester, which is ceramic red poppies, because the south of Israel is known during beautiful months of spring to be populated by these kalaniot, by these red poppies. And that's an active way of sanctifying memory, time, lives lost, and the resilience of our community. And there are countless ways in a universal sense that we do that too. But what I want to share is that this is also something that can happen in passive ways. And Rabbi Mervis has this beautiful concept, which is that when we teach holiness in our community, the passive way, the unconscious way that that's best manifest is through our children. That our children embody the values that we make sure to talk about out loud. And it's not passive, but it's not strategic. It's just the natural emanation of who we are. It's not that children aren't thoughtful. It's not to say that children don't make decisions. But how powerful it can be, friends, to be part of a community that engenders holiness by its natural function. That through the passage of time and through the way that we live, that we love, that we laugh, that we mourn, that we cry, that we rest, that we bless. All of this, yes, sometimes comes from strategic decision making, and sometimes it's just the way we talk to each other. I was recently interviewed on a podcast that featured my wife just a few days before me by a wonderful human being whose name is Avram Rosenzweig. You can find both those broadcasts and many others on his YouTube channel. Just look up Avram Rosenzweig podcast, or our names, you'll see it. And what really struck me was that he looked like he had planned questions, and then he just went in whatever direction our conversation led us. It is our obligation, I think, friends, to engender healthy and holy living. Sometimes that's going to be because we plan a moment and we create a ritual, or we respond with, well-chosen words. And sometimes it's going to be a community like this, where, 1,053 broadcasts in, there really isn't much planning we can do. I remember when I first sat, I'm sitting right where I sat when this broadcast began, a long, long time ago, 4 years, 2 months, and this table, and all of you. And I planned really hard. I had books and I would read and I would really sculpt out what I was going to say. And a bunch of weeks in, a bunch of months in, and now a bunch of years in, it has been a fascinating experience to, yes, think for a second about what I'm going to be sharing, but actually, this community is an organic manifestation of the best of Jewish people. Just showing up, being in conversation, as Rosa just did so naturally, sending care and healing. As Liba just did, sending emojis that embody good intentions. As friends find us through algorithms and by choice. I just want to bless us to know that holiness flows through us. Sometimes we have to make active choices and strategic position taking and architectural design, and it's all holy. It really is. But there's another way to be holy, which is to be in a community that promotes it. It's to allow ourselves and to notice our children who flow with the values that we teach. And yes, of course, we can comment about communities that don't flow with holiness. But it's not to say that they couldn't. And even acknowledging that is Torah trying to remind me to see divinity in the eyes of the other. If I live in reaction all the time, I'm not in that divine flow. Of course, sometimes reacting is sacred. But let's be who we are. Let's be the best of who we are. Let's hold our hearts and allow Torah to swirl. And what emanates from us should be the best of us. The best of us. So let's do that. Let's hold on to the best of us and pour it into the world. Let's send our hearts east, friends, on this 223rd day since October 7th. We pray. Kolon baleva penima nefesh Yehudi homia ulefate mizrach kadima ayin letzion Sophia od lo avda tikvateinu hatikva bat shnot alpayim liot am chofshi be'artzeinu Eretz Zion v'Yerushalayim liot am chofshi be'artzeinu Eretz Zion v'Yerushalayim. Bring them home now. Bring them home now. Am Yisrael Chai, friends. See you tomorrow.